Hey guys, it's Ryan here with Hobbies of Man once again, and today we're doing another episode of the Sword and Sorcery Book Club. It's been a long week for me. I had my first full week of work plus my full-time studentship as a MBA candidate, and man, I'm not gonna lie to you, I am dead on my feet, but I want to keep doing the channel and stuff even though I'm pretty tired, so we're gonna keep going through the Scourge to we're going to keep going with the road to the Scourge of the Serpent, and today we're looking at the Steve Costigan stories that I picked out. So there's two of them, and really I didn't need to do the second one, but since I had mentioned it already, I decided to go ahead and do both of them in this video. So we're looking at the Bulldog breed, which is in February 1930. It was published in Fight Stories. And then we're going to look at the second story, which I think actually is the second Steve Costigan story. I'm not really sure on that though, which was released in May of 1930, also in Fight Stories. And both of these stories have alternative names. Like the Bulldog breed is also called What You Need to Kill a Bulldog, or You Gotta Kill a Bulldog. And the other story, the Fist and Fang story, is also called Cannibal Fist, right? That second name is really a bit more inflammatory than it really needs to be, but it is pretty accurate to what happens in the series or in the story. So Steve Costigan is basically the best of the boxing characters that Robert E. Howard created. He's kind of the one that has the most stories, and he's related to another one that Robert E. Howard also wrote about. I can't remember his name, but it's also a Costigan character. He might be John Costigan, maybe. I'm not really sure. I can't remember, but it was mentioned in one of these stories that he's related to Iron something Costigan, and that it's his younger brother, I think. So, yeah, but the Bulldog breed is a pretty great story. I actually quite liked it. I like both of them, to be honest with you, but I do think the Bulldog breed is a bit more fun because it really does have that kind of like normal person appeal to it that maybe some of the more fantastical sword and sorcery stories don't quite achieve, right? Because those characters are mythical. Steve Costigan does have like a mythic kind of vibe to him, but in the same way that Teddy Roosevelt, right, kind of has. Like, it's like a guy who's really just a normal person, but through circumstances ends up doing these really awesome and interesting stuff, right? Or things, right? And Steve Costigan is a sailor. He is an American sailor of the Black Irish, descent, like Robert E. Howard himself, if I remember correctly. And he sails on the ship called the Sea Girl. He has a lot of friends that sail with him, and the captain is referred to simply as the old man, like the old man of the ship, who's the captain of the ship. And sailor Steve Costigan also has a pet bulldog, and this bulldog is from Ireland. He found it kind of as a stray somewhere in Dublin one time that they were on land, right, during one of their dockings. And so he decided to keep it because something about the dog spoke to him, and they found a very meaningful friendship with each other. And so everywhere Steve Costigan goes, Mike the Bulldog does as well. And this story actually starts with Mike the Bulldog biting the old man of the ship, of the Sea Girl. And so both Steve Costigan and Mike have to leave the ship next time they dock. And they do, and they dock somewhere where there's a French setting. I don't know if they dock in the Mediterranean or somewhere in Asia where there's a French presence. I can't quite remember that, but they dock there. Steve Costigan and Mike the Bulldog get off, and it seems like this will be the last time that sailor Steve Costigan sails on the Sea Girl. And so he has a feeling of sadness to him. Of course, as much sadness as a sailor can show, which is quite minimal. And so he goes off to a bar. It ends up being a bar full of French people. And while he and Mike the Bulldog are sitting there, a fancy, smashy, kind of asshole French guy called Francois shows up. And he beats up Costigan's dog, and so Costigan sees red, and he challenges him to a duel. Or he gets challenged to a duel when Costigan wants to fight this guy, right? And this guy's pretty happy about that. He's excited about the fight, and so they set up the duel immediately. They go off to a special club, and there it turns out that the guy that he's fighting is actually like the heavyweight champion of the French Navy. And it's someone that the old man of the Sea Girl has a previous acquaintanceship with. He got beat in a boxing match by this guy earlier, and it kind of smarts the old man a lot. And so even though Costigan isn't really aware of that throughout the battle or throughout the fight, he manages to win, and so he gets allowed back on the Sea Girl because he defended his captain's honor to an extent, right? But most of the story is really giving us an understanding of who Steve Costigan is. You know, he's a sailor. He's kind of bad-mouthed, but the way that Robert E. Howard writes it, there's no actual curse words. There's, you know, like appeals to gods like Jupiter and stuff like that. And there's also these kind of funny statements where instead of saying, you know, fucking asshole, he says blankety blank, you know, French person, right? Or whatever. And I'm not sure if that's because fight stories didn't allow curse words or if it was because it added kind of a funny element to the storytelling. I think it probably was because it added a funny element. I don't see why the pulps wouldn't allow curse words. But I'm not sure. If any of you guys know, please let me know down below. And so most of the time, the story focuses on the fight. And the fight is going to be a 12-round fight, 3-minute rounds. And they're playing by a specific set of rules that I'm not quite sure what they are. But it was like something Queensberry rules. And so they have a guy that referees. He thankfully speaks English, so Steve Costigan knows what he's saying. And the fight starts, and initially, Steve Costigan seems to think that he's going to have it easy, but it turns out that this guy is a proper fighter, and so Steve Costigan's in for a tough fight, and so he's in it. He's getting hit every time he punches the guy. The guy manages to land 3 hits on him, so this guy is outsmarting him, outplaying him, and also just has better technique than Costigan. But Costigan is of the bulldog breed, and so he won't give up, right? And eventually he gets knocked down. He manages to come back up at the 4 count, and then he continues fighting and fighting and fighting, and later he gets knocked down again. He lasts until the 7th count, and then he starts getting up and manages to barely get up on the 9th count in like the 8th or 9th round or something like that. And then the battle just kind of gets worse and worse throughout the bout. And Costigan, in kind of his delirium, as he's getting the shit rocked, the shit beat out of him, he remembers a situation he saw when he was laid out in some, like, cold place. Mike, the bulldog, had been defending the little cottage where they were healing Steve Costigan, and he was up against this mangy, horrible monster of a wolf dog. And, the battle was very similar to what Steve Costigan is going through right now. It's a stronger, bigger fighter who's, ruining Steve Costigan, or in this case, Mike the Bulldog. And he remembers that Mike doesn't care, that Mike didn't care, that he was willing to basically end his life to beat this character, to beat this wolf, right? This wolf dog. And so Costigan feels this camaraderie with his dog, and he remembers that he is of the bulldog breed, and in order to defeat a bulldog, you have to kill it. There is no way that they're going to back down, right? And so Costigan gets back up, he continues fighting, and ultimately, finally, the other character manages to start losing his stamina. He just can't deal with the fact that Costigan keeps getting up, and that he's a glutton for punishment, right? And so eventually, finally, Costigan lands a hit, and I think it's a hit against his ribs, and then manages to hit him to knock him out in the chin, I think, right? Something like that. Or he manages to land a face hit in some way, and the man goes down, and he doesn't get up, and Costigan won the fight just barely, and then he gets back to his corner, and then falls unconscious. And when he comes to right after the battle, or right after the fight, he's surrounded by his friends from the Sea Girl. And the sea captain, the old man, is like, "You avenged me, son. You get to be back on the ship." And Mike the Bulldog is allowed, and he's the best, and he really exemplifies what we're all about, right? And so he gets to be back on the ship, which is really awesome. I really liked it because, it depicts brutal combat. very, very clearly. It shows you that kind of Iron Man kind of atavistic nature of characters. It shows you that Costigan isn't really a smart fighter, but he's one that won't give up, and that is enough to let him win most battles. And it really kind of gives you this great, relationship between a man and his dog, which is, I think, something that is always appreciated, right? The idea that a man and his dog can understand each other and support each other and be there for each other, even through the difficulties of interspecies, camaraderie, right? And it works out really, really nicely. And it kind of has a lot of resilience to it in a way that is really cool. I like that a lot. It's a very kind of like manly kind of story without going into any kind of misogynistic or kind of weird kind of like stuff like that. It just works out really, really nicely. It shows you the adversities that man faces, and it shows you how to overcome them just through sheer grit and determination. And it was a great, great story. I really, really enjoyed it. By comparison, Fist and Fang is about survival. It's a story that I think follows up on the first one. I think there might have been another story in between, but I don't know which one it is. So if you guys know, please let me know that in the comments. But Steve Costigan and a friend of his on the Seagirl, as they arrive at Ratoa, which is some island in the Pacific Southwest, right? Like a Pacific Island kind of place. Steve and his friend, I think his name is Tom Roche, maybe? Maybe not. I'm not really sure. Let's see if I can double check that. No, sorry. Tom Roche is the friend that helps him in the first story. Bill O'Brien is the guy that is with him in this second story, in Fist and Fang. And they go off on a little boat to this other island nearby to go visit their friend Chief Togo, who is a man that led a village of Borneo natives, I guess, or some sort of Pacific Island village, and they're going to go visit him. And it turns out that when they arrive, the village has been moved, and the village leader has been killed and kind of sacrificed and turned into a desiccated head or something. And the man that is now in charge is an old enemy of Steve Costigan, a character known as Santos, the Tiger of Borneo, who is this massive, massive dude who Costigan once beat very, very severely in such a way that his career as a boxer was ruined. And so this guy has this crazy vendetta against Costigan. And so now that Costigan has fallen in his lap, Santos is going to try to kill him, but not just kill him, he's also going to torture him. A death by 1,000 cuts is what's going to happen to Costigan. And so Costigan has to fight for his life, for Mike the Bulldog's life, and for his friend Bill O'Brien's life as well. And so he is fighting a no holds barred boxing match against the Tiger of Borneo, and well, he's losing a lot because this guy is just so much better than him, right? But again, the bulldog breed shows itself, and Costigan manages to hold his own against this character, right? Through just managing just barely to avoid getting knocked out, right? And as the battle seems to come to an end, Costigan manages to beat him, and as the natives are about to start killing them anyways, his friends from the Seagirl arrive and help him get rid of all the natives, get them away from them. And so Costigan, his friend O'Brien, and Mike get the healing that they need, and they go off onto their next adventure. This one was a bit shorter. Actually, I think the story was longer, but in terms of what happens, I feel like it's a bit shorter and easier to describe. And this one was a pretty fun story as well. I like the element here that was added through these characters who are sailors, kind of involving themselves in the politics by accident, in the politics of different native tribes around the region, right? It kind of reminds me of when Jack Sparrow was, in that, I think it was like Papua New Guinea island, right? In one of the movies, and it has that kind of feel to it. But it also reminds me of the Jules de Grandin story that I read last year. I can't remember the name of it, but there was one where Jules de Grandin ends up on an island helping kind of come up with an explanation for why ships are being lost at sea. And he ends up kind of fighting against this guy who's half native, half European, or whatever. I think in Santos' case, he's something else. He's not European. He's like proper Pacific Islander, but he's like two different types, and so there's of course some mild racism thrown in there. But this kind of idea of these like sailors just kind of ending up in battles for survival where they might have not had to deal with that if they weren't sailors, just kind of adds like a little bit of an element of interest to the story, right? Because a normal boxing character would have never ended up in this situation, but because Costigan is not just a boxer but also a sailor, he does end up in these weird, crazy, like exotic situations, right? And it's pretty fun. I really, really enjoyed it. I actually liked it a lot, but I do think the first story is better in my opinion. And this second story is maybe a bit more similar to what we saw the other day in the Savage Sword, like the battle for survival aspect of it, right? Because in the first story, the setting is more similar because they're in a civilized place. They meet with a character that's slimy, and then they have to go fight him. The kind of vibe of it is a bit more similar to the second story, The Fist and Fang, than it is to the Bulldog breed. So it was a great story. I really, really enjoyed it. I do have to say that I'm not super a fan of some of the ways that Robert E. Howard writes in this case, because he writes in a much more like it's refined because this is later in his life, I think, but it has a certain like blasé kind of way of writing, and like the way that he writes feels more like it's coming from Steve Costigan's mind. And Steve Costigan is not a particularly educated person, and so some of the ways that it's written kind of show that. And so it's kind of hard to read sometimes. It's a bit difficult. Some of the accent work that he does through the dialogue and some of the ways in which Costigan expresses himself kind of make it hard for me to understand him sometimes. But with all that said, the stories are really fun and they're kind of blood pumping and they're really exciting to read because they're not fighting mythical creatures or anything, but it's just the proper, like, I might die and I need to do what I can, and the only tools available to me are my fists, and I'm going to make it work, right? And that's really cool and really fun and a lot of, fun to read. So, yeah, those are my thoughts here on these stories. In terms of how they're going to relate to the Scourge of the Serpent, I have no clue, to be honest with you. I'm not really sure at all. I tried to think about it last night, and the only way I can think of it working is if Costigan ends up being a character that ends up joining with Kiroan in some way, and his, knowledge of some of these, like, islands and kind of weird things that happen out at sea might end up playing into the fact that the Serpent Ring is out there, right? And I know how it ties into the Costigan story that Jim Zub wrote, but I don't know how the lore of Costigan is going to match up with the other stories, because I don't think Costigan has any weird elements in his story. I mean, his dog talks to him, or sort of talks to him. Like, Costigan can understand what his dog is saying, but only in very specific moments, mostly when he's delirious. And so is he really understanding, or is he just projecting what he wants his dog to say to him in these moments of, like, delirium, right? And so, I don't know. The idea of having Conan, Kiroan, Brizza probably, and a few other characters joining up with Costigan, who carries around his little dog, might be kind of fun, though. Like, I really love Woola and John Carter, like, going on adventures together, right? They don't really, but I remember in the movie they do, and I think that would be a fun element to add into the Conan lore in the Scourge of the Serpent, right? Just the fact that Conan and a bunch of other barbarous men from different eras, also a dog, who's also just as barbarous as them, go on this adventure to save the world from an eldritch being, just sounds fun. I wonder if we're going to get to see Mike the Bulldog rip some throats out, because he does that in one of these stories. So that'll be pretty fun. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, that's all I have to say about this for this Road to the Scourge of the Serpent episode. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoy. And I know this came out a day later than usual. I will also try to get around to reviewing Conan the Barbarian number 24 tomorrow, Saturday. I just haven't picked up the copy of the issue, so I didn't want to do it until I had it. So I'll go buy it tomorrow, probably in the morning, and then hopefully by the evening I'll have the video out. So yeah, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and see you guys next time.